All right, good morning, Union Academy. We're coming to you live from the NPR for our high school students to kick off their hour of code today. I'm very excited that we have a guest speaker with us, Mr. Ralph Hunter, who is a self-taught coder, and he'll tell you a little bit more about his business and how being able to code has helped him save money as well as make money and to support his employees through this. I also think he has a slight addiction to coding because he says in his spare time that's all he wants to do. So please welcome Mr. Ralph Hunter to Union Academy.
Thank you. So first thing I want to do is say thank you for having me. I really appreciate that. I want to thank the people at Union County Academy here. What an amazing school. I'm older than I'd probably like to admit, but not that unbelievably old. When I was in high school, we didn't have anything like this. This is just mind-blowing to me. When I was in high school, you knew you were in school every minute of every day. And here, it really lets you guys cut loose and kind of make the most of it. So it's pretty neat to see. And I think it'll help you guys out a lot. It's a pretty awesome place. So once again, thank you for having me. And thanks to the staff here. So a little bit about me. My name is Ralph Hunter. I own a real estate company. We do mostly property management, which would typically mean we rent houses out. So some of you guys may be renters. A lot of times when somebody owns a home, particularly during, say, the recession, when things got really bad in 2008, 2009, people would come to us when they couldn't sell their home. And they needed something to kind of make ends meet. And they would come to us and we would find a renter who would move in and live there for a year or two, and we'd handle the maintenance and things of that matter. That's pretty much all we do. We don't do much with sales, just mainly property management. I'm more of a hands-on analytical guy. And that's what I've been doing for pretty much my adult life. When Ms. Sammons first asked me to come here, I thought it was a little bit unusual that she would ask me to speak at a programming or coding event. As they mentioned, I'm self-taught, amateur as they get. There's no question about that. However, as I was thinking a little bit more about it, I certainly started to see where her thinking was on that and where I could add some value. And probably the best thing that I could do is really make this a practical conversation. I'm a very practical person. I love efficiency. That's kind of my thing. And if a really high-class programmer came in here and tried to talk to you guys, they would probably miss the mark on a lot of things as far as what's possible, because they have a tendency, if you've been to 5, 6, 7 years of education on the matter, you're probably going to be proud of what you've done. Sometimes you'll talk over people and maybe not be able to communicate. But in my life, I can give very real-world examples of how technology overall, and then more recently programming, and also kind of when I first started my business, has helped me on the ground. I mean, not theory, in real life, it's made a huge difference for me. And give you a little bit of background on what I mean by that is, when I started my company, I was 20 years old, so very, very young. And as I said, it's a real estate company. And in the real estate world, particularly back then, it was run primarily by people who were at least 20 years older than me on average. They usually had a lot more money, a lot more resources, a lot more contacts. I was green as they come, as fresh as they come. And it was a tough world. It's a tough business. Technology can make your life easy in a lot of ways. Real estate is typically a pretty old-fashioned industry. And for a young man to try to break into that business, it was pretty tough. And without a doubt, technology was the primary part of that, and a lot of hard work. And that's something I'll touch on a little bit more. There's never a substitute for really hard work. But technology made a world of difference for me against a lot of my old-fashioned competitors who just were really way behind the times. And I'd like to think that my embracing of technology has spurred a lot of them to pick it up as well, because a lot of my competitors have sort of grabbed onto a lot of the things that we do. And made it a little bit harder for me to compete with them, unfortunately, but that's part of life. When I first started, I taught myself how to program my own website. That was kind of where things started for me. And I don't know if you consider HTML coding, but building websites, now it's gotten a lot more advanced as HTML5 and a lot of other things involved. But, you know, building a website back then, you can do them pretty cheap now, but back then you didn't have all these awesome little programs on the internet that are pretty easy and pretty cheap. Usually if you wanted to build an internet, a website, it was about $3,000 for the most basic thing you could possibly build. And as far as taking care of your computers, installing software, troubleshooting, all of those things are unbelievably expensive for a young man trying to start a business with very little resources. So my knowledge in that field made a world of difference. It saved me huge amounts of money that I could then apply to a little bit more conventional aspects of my business to help me better compete with some of my competitors. Technology has followed me for years. When I first started out, it was a major part, and then I kind of hit a part of my career where I was spending more time focusing on sort of more of the old-fashioned aspect of it, hiring and training. That was quite a learning experience, to say the least. Wasn't able to apply technology too much at that point until more recently, where I have. And we currently got 7 employees right now. And recently, I had a young lady who was doing a lot of our marketing. And this is what I say when I say hard work, there's never a substitute for that. And before I get on that subject, so the future for you guys can be both a little bit scary and also really exciting, extremely exciting, in that you probably have heard this, and people used to say it to me when I was your age, this is a turning point in history. And in my case, it really wasn't. I mean, it certainly is. The internet certainly changed things. But I think for you guys in particular, it's really, truly a turning point in history. Artificial intelligence is starting to do some unbelievably amazing things. Automation is really starting to hit its stride. Automation, when I was in high school, was typically a $100,000 robot in a factory doing production. But nowadays, they're getting to the point where they're automating a lot of things, very small things, everyday jobs that you might have never guessed otherwise. For example, paralegals, which is a huge business. They've got artificial intelligence programs now that do a lot of that work for them. And that's why I say it's a little bit scary. The job market is going to change. I pretty much guarantee you in your lifetime in a huge, huge way. And a lot of jobs that are around today won't be here in a few years. Paralegals may be gone. Truck drivers, which are one of the largest career paths in America, a lot of them will probably be gone in the next 10 to 15 years. So that's a little bit concerning. But the reason I say it could also be a really bright future is because it's truly a turning point where you can take control of your destiny like really never before and do some really exciting and amazing things. But like I said, there's really no substitute for hard work. So even if you were to learn to code, you still have to get out there and work really hard, especially in this industry. At some point in the not too distant future, they'll probably have artificial intelligence that can do a lot of the coding also. So the job market, the way that I see it, and most people probably see it, is it's going to turn a lot from doing more mundane, repeating tasks to a lot more with customer service. A lot of the artificial intelligence and the machines are going to do a lot of the actual heavy lifting, and people like us are going to interact with one another, things that machines and artificial intelligence won't be able to do anytime soon real well. It'll be very customer service focused. However, that's not always a great thing for everyone. In my case, customer service isn't really my thing. I'm very analytical, I'm very hands-on, I like to work with my hands. I'm not a customer service guy, and that's why technology and coding played such a big role in my life, because whereas most people who start a business in the real estate business, they get out and kind of hobnobbing and talking a lot and meeting with people. I was constantly buried behind a computer, which is what I love, and I was able to build a huge part of my business doing exactly that. And even to this day, I still don't get out and do a whole lot with my customers. I've got some staff, some amazing staff who do a lot of that for me. And I can kind of just focus on what I love about the job, which is a lot of the technology and whatnot. So if you're not a big time people person, really customer service focused, then you've got a lot to learn in the near future, because a lot of those jobs are going to go away, and you either need to be really, really good at what you're doing, or you're going to have to get into the customer service business, basically, is how that would work out. So a little story about my more recent coding. So as I mentioned, when I first started out, I was doing mostly HTML website design type stuff, a little bit with databases. Big data is another frontier that's pretty amazing, that you're going to hear tons and tons about over the future. All this social media stuff that we're all doing, this stuff has value. One thing that a lot of people mention that I think is very insightful is they say data or information is the new oil. So you guys probably have some idea, you know, the oil companies of the old days in the 1920s and 30s, that was where the money was. That's where everybody wanted to get jobs. That's where all the talent went. And it was all about oil. And I'm really excited, you know, of course, oil has its downsides, and technology, of course, also has its downsides as well. But in my business, it's a lot more exciting than oil. And it's a lot more accessible than oil. You know, in the 1920s and 30s, you had to have huge amounts of money to start digging holes in the ground and pulling up oil, and then, of course, the infrastructure to ship it and everything. But with information and data, you could start this today. And I'm about to give you a little bit of a story where I kind of did that. I just, the safety of my little office, just picked up and kind of started to do some pretty shocking things, to me at least. I don't know about the others. But information and data, it's sort of like the new oil. It's where the talent's going. It's fascinating, and it's pretty exciting. I think you guys should be excited to have that opportunity, because you don't have to have massive resources to do a lot with it. I literally about 6 months ago is when I kind of made the leap from doing primarily a little bit with databases and websites to doing some more significant programming. And honestly, I can't even really remember exactly how it came about. It was a few different things. Funny enough, Acacia and I have been talking, I got a Roomba, which sort of brought me back to when I was in college, a class that I took that was one of the most exciting classes I've ever taken. And basically, we built Lego robots in this class. And this was at Chapel Hill, high-end computer science class. And we built Lego robots the entire semester, and it was awesome and a lot of fun. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too later on. But I messed around with it a little bit when I was a freshman in high school. Unfortunately, I got away from it. I don't have many regrets in life, and sometimes I sort of regret not sticking with it a little bit more. When I was in college, just my freshman year, it's not that insightful. I'm not trying to act like I had some breakthrough idea, but I wrote a paper on self-driving cars, basically. It was a lot about cars that would brake on their own. It's pretty simple physics. You know, if you're driving forward and there's something stopped in front of you, the physics of the matter are the math of it is pretty cut and dry as far as how quickly you need to stop to avoid hitting that thing in front of you. And like I said, it wasn't anything especially breakthrough at that point, but if I had stuck with it, obviously, I'm sure most of you guys know that that's what everybody's doing nowadays is self-driving cars. Uber, Google, Lyft, Mercedes, all the biggest, most exciting names are all doing this stuff left and right. And when I was 15 years ago, I wrote a paper on it, and at the time it was unheard of. It was unheard of. I mean, people had thought about it, but it was not happening. So Tesla is another one that I'd probably love to work for. Elon Musk is an awesome guy. They're probably the leader in it, them and Google. And, you know, I could be working for Google or Tesla, and I'm really happy with my life. I've done pretty well, and things are great, but I've had to work unbelievably hard. And like I said, I don't want to downplay how hard you have to work to make it in the future, particularly as more artificial intelligence and machines take jobs. You'll have to probably work harder than I did. But I had to do a lot of hard work that I didn't love, as far as, like I said, the customer service aspect of it, sort of the busy work and things of that nature. If you did want to explore an advanced degree in coding and technology, then you could do typically probably hard work that you absolutely love, something that just every day is unbelievably exciting. You never feel like you're doing busy work, and you can see how it changes the world around you. But what I don't want you to think is that you do have to have an advanced degree or advanced mathematical knowledge to be a decent programmer and put it to work. And that's where I probably have a lot to offer you guys, because I am not a mathematics genius at all. I don't have an advanced degree. In fact, as far as math goes at this point in my career, I almost never do anything other than simple math, very simple math. And yet I'm still putting programming to use and seeing really good results from it. But, you know, looking back, it would have been pretty exciting to go that route. But it's okay that I didn't, because I was still able to put it to work later on in my career. So as I mentioned, recently I had 8 staff, and one of them was a young lady who was doing a lot of my marketing. And this story will sound a little bit cold in a way, but that's the future. So I want you guys to understand why this is an important story. She was doing our marketing, and a lot of it was listing properties. As I told you, I do rentals. We list them on the internet, Zillow, Google, things like that, and bring renters in and leads to rent them. Well, the vast majority of what she did was on the web. She was essentially typing in addresses, descriptions of the properties, mapping, and handling leads and things of that nature. Almost primarily web-based, and it was complicated in that there were a lot of steps, but it didn't take a genius to do it, but ultimately it was a lot of work, and she wasn't an exceptionally hard worker, and she didn't put a whole lot of effort out. And as I mentioned, I've got some amazing staff, and we're a very small company, so we're very tight-knit. And when you've got 6 people who are working unbelievably hard, and then you have a 7th person who's just kind of doing enough to get by, and because she was sort of handling the technology side of our business, she probably thought it was going to be sort of a cakewalk, and you know, she perhaps maybe thought she was a little bit better than a lot of our account managers. I'm not exactly sure, but she never had the work ethic that the rest of us had. And it was starting to cause problems in our office, and I could feel that they were unhappy. They felt like they were being mistreated, and with good reason. And, you know, for any business owner, you immediately start to think, I've got to fix this problem. What can I do to fix it? And as I mentioned, you know, not too terribly long ago, I got a Roomba, which kind of brought my mind back to when I was in college. And I read a couple of books on artificial intelligence, which is a fascinating subject. I mean, fascinating. If you really, really, really look into it, and I don't mean, you know, the gimmicks and the movies. If you really think about the concept, I'll just touch on this real quick. The human brain is the most complex thing in the known universe. By far, there's nothing more complex in the world. Humans are special in that way. I think sometimes we might think we're a little too special. The world in general is a special place, but the human brain, very much a very special thing. At some point in your lifetimes, maybe even mine, there's a good chance we may develop something that's more complex and more advanced than the human brain. And that really should boggle your mind a little bit. A machine potentially that's smarter than almost every human being, or maybe all human beings. And that is going to change the world in a way the world has never been changed, or the known universe for that matter. If you go back from the time that we had cavemen to now, we've had personal computers, transistors, programming, internet, cell phones. All those things are amazing inventions that have made some pretty amazing changes from the caveman times. But we're very close, most likely, to a point in history where all of that stuff seems minor. The internet, relative to a caveman, is a minor invention compared to if we have a computer that's more intelligent than a human being. So when I read a couple of these books on artificial intelligence, it just blew my mind, got me unbelievably excited, and I started to think to myself, you know, the future is going to involve machines in a major way. So I thought, I kind of want to know what's coming. You know, if you don't, I'm kind of a control freak. And the thought of a world that I can't communicate with and I don't understand terrified me. I didn't like it, and also excited me. So I immediately went out, and that's when I started kind of trying to teach myself how to program. Did a little bit of research. It quickly became obvious to me there's a programming language called Python that is pretty well known to be the simplest, most intuitive, easier for human beings to understand, doesn't require a lot of little piddly little symbols and things you have to use. Very simple, very intuitive. And as I mentioned, I'm a very efficient and I like simple and quick and easy and things that I can immediately put to work. And so Python grabbed my attention right off the bat, and I started toying around with it. And as I mentioned to you, when I was in college, we were building these Lego robots that were pretty amazing, pretty awesome. And so I went and bought, it's actually called Lego Mindstorms. So I bought one, I ordered it, not through Amazon Prime, so I had to wait about a week to get it, unfortunately. Should have just went with Prime, right? So I'm sitting around waiting for this thing to get here, and I'm just like, I cannot wait for my robot to get here, and I'm 35 years old. And, and I'm watching some YouTube videos, and this guy comes on, he starts talking about how to automate the web. And I'm thinking, wow, you know, I do a lot on the web. Lori, who I probably need to replace because she's killing the atmosphere around my small office, does a lot on the web. And I was thinking, and she also made a lot of errors. She wasn't focused. She was apparently doing something else. I don't know. But she had a tendency to make a lot of little errors. And when you're listing properties, if you forget to put the number of bedrooms in, that's a big deal. Because if somebody's looking for a 4-bedroom unit and it shows no bedrooms, it won't show up in the search. Those little errors are a big deal. And she was making a lot of them. So I was like, I wonder if I can cut down on the errors by doing a lot of her work. And at the time, it hadn't crossed my mind that maybe I could replace her. But that's exactly what happened. And this is an adult woman with a legitimate job, making a pretty solid yearly salary. And within, my first question was, you know, can I log into these websites? Because a lot of times with security, they the CAPTCHA codes and things, they make it complicated. But sure enough, you know, I was able to log into a couple of sites, and it caught a hold of me. And as Katie mentioned when she introduced me, when it caught a hold of me, ever since then, that's all I think about is what can I automate in my life? I'm obsessed with it. And if you can get that bug, then I think the future will be unbelievably bright for you. And like I said, you don't have to be a mathematical genius. I certainly am not. The programming I've done so far requires almost no math. And this was, I guess, about 4 or 5 months ago. I just went to town. I've always worked a lot, but now when I work a lot, it's fun and exciting. And I'm not just making phone calls to people, which I hate. I'm, automating my business. So when you automate a lot of your business and you cut your expenses down, you don't necessarily have to have so much revenue. So, anytime you run a business, you've got the money that comes in and the money that goes out. And they both play a very important role. If you've got a lot of money going out, you better have a lot of money coming in. If you don't have much money going out, you don't necessarily need tons of money coming in. And that's one of the beautiful things that programming has done. I can focus on the things that are most important to me because I've managed to cut my expenses down dramatically. So I don't have to have huge amounts of business. I don't have to get out there frantically pounding the pavement, making phone calls, hassling people, trying to drum up new business because my expenses are quite low. So I started programming in Python and automating the web. And within a couple of months, I had basically written out the basics of a program that, I kid you not, did 70% of this young lady's job automated. It was pretty much done for me by a program in just a few months. And like I said, I had a little bit of background knowledge in HTML, which is a very simple, it's really not even a programming language, it's called some markup situation. It's similar to programming. Get your mind thinking in that direction, which is helpful. But within a couple of months, I'd automated her business. And I didn't want her to to be completely shocked when I let her go, but I immediately, within a month of starting this, knew that her job was no longer very important to our company. And so, I started kind of explaining to my staff what I was doing and what was happening and showing them the results that I was getting to sort of give her a little bit of a heads up of what was coming. And after about 3 or 4 months of my learning the program, I had to let her go. And that sounds cold, but like I said, it's important that you guys get a realistic view of the job market. I'm a small business, a young guy. I can be cold, but I work closely with these people and I care a lot about them. And most of my staff, I care a lot about. But like I said, if one's not working hard and the rest are, you make my job a little bit easier for having to let you go. After letting her go, the beautiful part of that issue is the girls that I do have and the guys that are working unbelievably hard, the ones that kind of forced my hand in making me let her go. We freed up so much money. Like I said, 6 people, freed up about 17% of my payroll, which is my biggest expense. And it's the biggest expense for most companies, is paying people, the job itself. Money you have to send these people to live is the biggest expense for almost every company in the country. And so I freed up almost 17% of my largest expense overnight, almost. And there are some companies that may, they'll send that off to shareholders and not roll it back into the business. But I'm progressive, aggressive, and I want to grow my company a lot. And as I mentioned, I'm very close to my staff. So that 17%, I immediately plowed it right back into the business. I started looking at more ways to involve technology in my business. But the most exciting thing is I was able to get dental insurance, vision, and health insurance for all my staff within a few weeks of letting her go. And health insurance these days is just unbelievable. I don't know if you guys are too aware of how that works out, but my health insurance, I'm a young, healthy guy, and Blue Cross notified me this year that my insurance is going up to $480 a month. My rent a year ago, I just had to move, it went up a lot. But a year ago, my entire rent for my whole place to live in a nice condo in downtown Raleigh was $700 a month. My health insurance is $480 a month now. So for me to have the ability to give that to my staff, I rolled out the health insurance, and it wasn't a second thought. They, over the last couple of months, have been so unbelievably excited. They had government plans that weren't very good, didn't cover the doctors they wanted, were still very expensive and hard to deal with. And they have been unbelievably excited. And it makes me excited and very happy. And it makes my business substantially stronger. My competitors do not offer health insurance to their staff. I'm pretty sure none of them do. And that gives me a huge advantage when I go to hire people. I will be able to get the best quality people out there. And that's what I mean when I first started and I said the future is both scary and bright. If you're the ones who aren't willing to work real hard, it's a concerning future, and you should be concerned because you won't have a lot of control over your destiny if you don't pick up technology and work hard to apply it. But if you do, like the other 20% of my staff, or 80% of my staff rather, who are still here, who have been working really hard, technology unlocked a critical need for them and has made them about as happy as I've ever seen them. And most of them have been with me for years, and they are just ecstatic about this. It hasn't even happened. It doesn't start until January the 1st. And over the last 3 or 4 months, it's been just unbelievably exciting around our office. So in America, they're starting to become a bit of an issue of the haves and the have-nots. And it's easy to end up in the have-not category without a doubt, but it's also easy to end up in the haves category. There's still a lot of amazing things about this country. And when you have a school like this that's so technologically advanced, you guys have a lot of opportunity. And all you have to do is just seize it. Just take it and run with it. And like I said, it's nothing too complicated. Don't make it into some giant event that it seems impossible to grasp. Like I said, in my case, in a matter of about 6 months, I automated 70% of a job. Basically, an entire human being, I automated 70% of what they did in our company. Applied about half of what I saved to making the people that stayed on their lives much better, making them a little bit more of the haves. And the other 50% of that I have kind of laying around, I'm going to plow it back into the business. I'm going to buy more, find more ways to automate, that's for sure, and more equipment and more advertising, and I'll grow my business. And while I shed that one job, which is sort of a dead weight situation, very shortly I will pick up more, I will create more jobs as a result of kind of dropping that dead weight, using that money to make the business more efficient, and we're always growing. Not all companies do that, particularly larger companies. It's unfortunate, but it's been really good for the people who did stay on. As I mentioned, our account managers, most of their job is customer service. They deal with people constantly. They do a lot of maintenance, handle maintenance, not actually do it. Project management kind of thing. And I used to tell them, you guys should feel great because robots will never take your job. And I say robots taking jobs sort of jokingly. It's really artificial intelligence and machines in general, not robots and the robots that look like human beings. That's sort of gimmicky. Don't think of it that way. Artificial intelligence, these are just programs that can do a lot of what human beings do. But when I started programming, I quickly learned robots won't take their jobs because the people that work for me are really good. They're rock stars, some of the best in the industry. But it is going to take jobs. As we grow and as we expand, I'll probably have to hire at least 30% less than my competitors, probably closer to 50% less. So if I'm competing against this company and they've got 20 staff, I can probably do the same thing that they're doing with 10 people, 10 staff. So of course those staff are going to be very well taken care of because they're really good, they've embraced technology, but it gives my company a huge advantage over my competitors. So to kind of recap what I was saying, when I started my company, technology played a huge role in my success as far as keeping my expenses down, allowing me to find avenues where I could thrive, where my competitors had never even considered it. Most of them were so old-fashioned. And basically, a huge part of my company early on the stage was built primarily on technology. And that's what the future holds. So if you embrace it and you work hard and you learn the language of the future, which is why I ultimately kind of took that next big step into a little bit more complex programming, is because I wanted to learn the language of the future. Future is really, really bright for you guys, and you guys have a lot of opportunities here. Let me see how I'm doing on time.
Give enough time for questions.
Okay, great. Questions?
Do you not have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
I understand that you're into Bitcoin a little bit.
Yeah.
Could you give an elevator speech of 3-minute speech on cryptocurrency? Is anybody in here aware of cryptocurrency?
Ooh, good.
All right, and in Bitcoin, have you ever heard of Bitcoin?
Before I repeat the question, I'd like to say that I just want to bet, because I said the first question that I would be asked today would be about Bitcoin. So my staff owes me whatever I tell them they owe me at this point. I thought it would be a student, but I still win. We didn't get technical about it. All right. So to repeat the question, they asked me my thoughts on Bitcoin. And I'm glad you brought it up. It's something that's important to me, not because it directly affects my life, but because sort of my philosophies. As I mentioned, I'm very efficient, very much a lover of technology. The bigger thing, though, is Bitcoin is the big buzzword. That's the key word that everybody grabs on. It kind of clouds the issue, though, because Bitcoin is tied to money, which is such an emotional issue. The truly amazing thing about Bitcoin is the technology that underpins it, which sort of comes back to what I started off with. Technology was underpinning my business, and it's underpinning the whole concept of Bitcoin, and it's called blockchain. And the idea behind it is decentralization, and I'm a huge fan of that. As I mentioned, I'm kind of a control freak. I'm extremely independent. decentralization has always spoken loudly to me. And blockchain, it allows the average person to take control of kind of almost anything. And it sort of digitizes a lot of old-fashioned things. So with Bitcoin, if you think about it, you've got banks, and of course, you guys grew up in an era where banks have been, villainized to a large degree for good reason. But ultimately, the banks are sort of the gatekeepers. They make the decision on the future of the U.S. economy. Bitcoin is a very interesting way to sort of take some of that power back for us, for the average person, to kind of get it away from the banks, who do in large part run the world. I mean, if you drive into any large city in almost any country or any city in this country, then most of the huge buildings are banks. And you have to ask yourself, is that good for me? Why do we need such huge banks trading these massively complicated things that really have no benefit to the average person? I mean, honestly, they really don't. Banking should be a pretty simple issue, and they overcomplicate it because it enriches a few people. Blockchain is a great way to kind of bring that power back. So you can sort of eliminate the need for banks, and you will hear a lot about that in the near future. The banks are they're trying to get involved with it right now. It's sort of going mainstream, and that's interesting to see how that'll play out. But ultimately, with Bitcoin, the idea is that me and you set the value of Bitcoin, not Joe Banker over here, or the Federal Reserve, or the government says, we think the dollar is too strong. A strong dollar typically is really good for people like me and you, for the average person. But in Washington, D.C., they tend to not like strong dollars. They don't want you to have real strong purchasing power because it hurts the people who get them into office. And that situation is a little bit complicated. But ultimately, they set the value of what you're able to spend. And whereas if you can go out, take rents, for example. Like I said, I'm a rental manager. When I first started in this business, the average rental rate was about $1,000 a month. In the 12 years that I've been doing this, it's now gone up to about $1,200, $1,300 a month. So, 20-30% increase in rental rates, but wages haven't really gone up at all. People aren't making more money, and it's getting really hard for renters to make it at this point. And a lot of that comes to the centralization. There are a few people who make all the decisions, and they tend to make these decisions for a few of the really big haves, and it usually kind of works against us. We really have no say in, I don't want to be too alarmist, but we don't have as much say as it would be nice to have in our economy and our spending power and things of that nature. Bitcoin allows the average person to you can decide if you want to get involved in Bitcoin or not. And that, for me, is awesome. I love to have that power and take back a little bit of the control over my own destiny and my ability to spend and things of that nature.
We have another question.
Okay.
Yeah, we have one from Mr. Geraldo's classroom, from Alyssa, Aiden, and Leah Kate. They'd like to know, how often do you code?
All right. So the question is, how often do I code? And the answer is, I get up at about 4 o'clock in the morning. Every morning, including Saturdays and Sundays most of the time. I don't have really much of a life, unfortunately. Or maybe I do, it depends. But I'm not technically a morning person. I've always kind of been a night person by nature. But the mornings are so peaceful and so quiet. And coding typically requires a good amount of concentration. So I dedicate my mornings to coding almost every morning, to answer your question. So from about 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm coding as hard as I can, frantically getting as much done. And then when 9 o'clock it hits, my staff comes in, the phone starts to ring off the hook, and I come back to that part of my job I don't love that I told you about when I first started, dealing with people all the time and handling problems and things of that nature. So I code almost every day, to answer that question, and it's usually the most valuable part of my day in the morning when I'm sharpest and get my best work done by far.
Awesome. I think there was a question over here.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned Bitcoin earlier. How did you first get into Bitcoin, and like what methods do you use to acquire it? Do you like have a mining server? Do you like get it from transactions?
I don't take it that far. So it happened naturally. As I mentioned, all my life, ever since I was young, I was sort of a unbelievably independent, strong-willed, and wanted to take control of my own destiny in a major way. So Bitcoin, when it first came out, I was highly interested in it. But I also take a lot of pride in not getting too caught up in gimmicks. And that was one thing, if I had more time, I was hoping to cover. With programming, you can get caught up in gimmicks real fast, and try to avoid that trap. My best advice is find something that you can immediately apply to your life. And building games can be fun, but it's not that useful. If you can automate something in your life that's really fun, then go right for that. Like I use this chat program called Slack. That's a really popular program with some really smart people. And I was watching these YouTube videos about how to code Slack bots, and they're talking, get them to tell you the weather and things like that. And I'm just like, that's already been done. I don't care. It didn't appeal to me at all. But Bitcoin did, because that taking back control immediately caught my attention. But I also thought it sounded kind of gimmicky. There's another aspect of it that worried me. A lot of the value in Bitcoin is because it's encrypted, and it's basically this algorithm or this mathematical equation that's unbelievably hard to crack. And at this point, almost nobody can. Maybe the US government, maybe Chinese government, things of that nature can. But in general, you really can't crack encryption. And Bitcoin is encrypted, but they're making these quantum computers now that are pretty amazing. And these things can do some unbelievable computing. And also the way they work is pretty shocking too. It's unbelievable. The people who build them don't even know how they work, which blows your mind. But with quantum computers, they potentially could crack the encryption that comes with Bitcoin. So I was a little bit kind of negative on it, and I had a tendency to focus on the blockchain aspect of it, how that would affect the future, and that caught my attention. But I haven't gotten into mining. I work a lot. I'm mining real money. And, for me to pick up and change paths in that way would have been pretty tough. Mining Bitcoin eats up a huge amount of power. And sometimes I have some issues with that. I'd like to try to do good by my environment, if at all possible. So I actually just read an article. One guy said he hasn't heated his house in 3 years. Because when you mine Bitcoin, it eats up so much energy. It puts off massive amounts of heat to the point where you might have to run the AC in the wintertime because it puts off so much heat. So I haven't done any Bitcoin mining. I haven't done a whole lot with it. I bought a little bit just to kind of say I was in it. And honestly, you guys should maybe buy a little bit, just a little bit. Don't think you're going to get rich. It's just so you could say maybe you were a part of something. Drop $100 into it. Most of you guys can do that. Drop $10 into it. It's exciting, it's world changing. And that's a good way to get into it. And that's really all you have to do to make a difference. Okay.
So, what is coding?
What is it?
Like in the most simplistic terms for these kids, what is coding? What does that mean to code? You guys want to
Good question.
It is a good question. So, productivity is how I would view it. With the invention of social media, the productivity of the average American worker has gone down, or it's kind of remained stagnant for quite a while now. People spend more time, on Facebook, Twitter than they do actually working. For me, as I mentioned, I'm sort of efficient, and I like to have control, and those are sort of my thing. And coding increases productivity. So, for example, I'm here today. I can leave here in an hour or two, go back to my desk and launch 10 or 15 programs and keep my staff of 7 other people busy all day long from a couple of programs that I run over the course of a couple of minutes. So what would have taken me and multiple other people an entire day to do is now done in minutes automatically. And it's with a lot less errors than typically if a human being was doing it. So for me, as I mentioned, I'm I'm not getting too in the sky with it or too philosophical. For me, it's all about productivity. It makes me 10 times more productive. And the reason why I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to program, and the reason why I am so excited about it is because it's power. Productivity is power. And when you're more productive and you can do more than the average person, then you can go further than the average person. And that's what coding is to me.
I think that was our last question. Let's give Mr. Hunter a round of applause. I really appreciate you being here and speaking to our students. This is kind of a first for Union Academy to be able to live stream for our classrooms, and we appreciate you being a part of that and being our guinea pigs on that.
Glad to have you.
For those of you who are here in the NPR, as well as those who are listening in your classroom, there's one announcement that I want to make before you begin coding. You should have received an email from me yesterday afternoon regarding a challenge for y'all today during your hour of code. As you're coding in your classrooms, we want you to have fun with it. We want you to engage and work together on it if you'd like. But one of the things that will allow you to win a $25 gift card is while you are participating in Hour of Code, if you want to tweet or on your Instagram, use the hashtag Cardinal Coders and hashtag Hour of Code.
Oh, yes.
What the hashtag Cardinal of Coders allows you to do is to be entered into the drawing for the $25 gift card. What the hashtag Hour of Code allows is for you to link with the millions of people across the world who are participating in Hour of Code this week. So you will be able to take a picture with a group as we're coming around to your classrooms with our Cardinal Coders frame. But you can also just take your own pictures as you're coding. The only thing that I ask is please don't post any pictures of someone who hasn't given you permission to do so, okay? But please, if you want to be involved in the drawing to win $25, we'll announce the winner on Monday morning during the morning announcements. So those of you who are in NPR, please follow your teacher's instructions when you go back to your classroom, or if the teacher is keeping you here in the NPR. Those of you who are live feeding in your classroom, we'll make an announcement shortly to begin the Hour of Code. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Adam.